Yesterday, it was announced that the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals had dismissed unanimously a lawsuit that had been taken against by a citizen. As a matter of fact, it was called a citizen lawsuit filed by a group of citizens and an organization, the North Carolina Fisheries Reform Group, that was filed against a variety of individuals who shrimp and fish in Pamlico Sound. And the comments made in the brief and comments made as the lawsuit was being discussed publicly were pretty cut and dry. The court was really not impressed with the arguments posed by the plaintiffs. So with that, we welcome Glenn Skinner, again, the executive director of the North Carolina Fisheries Association. And Glenn, I asked you a moment ago, well, this court case began back in August of 2020. Here we are, 2023. So for all intents and purposes, 3 years later, almost exactly. Were you aware that this case had been settled at this point? Were you surprised by yesterday's announcement?
Not surprised by yesterday's announcement at all. Glad it finally came. We've been waiting months for this decision. The hearing was held in the fall, and we were curious as to why it was taking so long to get a ruling, because everything did seem cut and dry to us. It seemed like a really clear-cut case, and I'm just glad to see that common sense ruled today, and the judges ruled correctly, in our opinion.
Earlier, a lower court had decided that, and also same conclusion, that the lawsuit, which was presented again by a group of individuals, I'm going to run through their names very quickly: Joe Albea, David Sammons, Captain Seth Vernon, Captain Richard Andrews, Dwayne Bevell, and the North Carolina Fisheries Reform Group, argued that shrimp trawlers in the Sounds — I don't know that it applied to the open ocean, if I'm not mistaken. It was only for the Sound trawling. Am I correct, or did we know at this point?
If they had have won the case, it would apply to all navigable waters in
Ocean.
the U.S.
Okay.
So they were specific. The claims that they made occurred in the Sound, but it would have been much broader if the judge had ruled in their favor.
All right. And the two claims were that the disposal or the return — shouldn't say disposal — the return of bycatch. Define bycatch for us.
Bycatch is anything you catch while targeting another species, whether you keep it, sell it, eat it, or throw it back. If it wasn't the targeted species, it's bycatch. And in this case, with shrimping, it's generally juvenile fish, small fish of similar size to the shrimp that you're catching, and you throw them back overboard when you sort them out from the shrimp in your catch.
And the plaintiffs argued that the Federal Clean Water Act restricted any disposal of these fish into the water, the return of these fish, let me use that term, and that in essence it qualified as pollutants, right?
Absolutely. The Clean Water Act has very broad definitions of a pollutant. One of them is biological material.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
so a fish that came from the ocean going back in might be its biological material.
Yeah, a piece of grass. You take your lawnmower and mow down the shore and you blow grass in the water. You, under their determination, were violating the Clean Water Act. It's biological material. So there any number of things that you enter into the water. I think you have to look at the intent and how it got there, and that kind of stuff to really determine whether it's a violation of the Clean Water Act. And obviously, catching a fish and throwing it directly back into the water after you caught it is not a violation of the Clean Water Act. If it was, everybody who fished would be in violation.
That is exactly the comment of Judge Julius Richardson. All right, the other aspect of this lawsuit was that because there are times when the net drags on the bottom, it might in fact churn up the bottom, and that also justified or raised a level of pollution, if I understood this lawsuit correctly.
Yeah, under the Mr. Albea and the other defendants' interpretation, when our trawl doors, tickler chains stir up sediment on the bottom, they considered it to be dredge spoil, which is
Hmm.
a pollutant under the Clean Water Act, which sand, gravel, rock is also a pollutant. But when you're stirring up something that's already in the water, you're not introducing it into the water. You're not discharging it.
Hmm.
It exists. It's there. All you were doing is stirring it up. No different than when our ferries, passenger ferries, cross the Pamlico Sound and that muddy streak of water's behind them in our shallow
Good point.
sounds, or an outboard motor, or a yacht or barge going down the intercoastal waterway, stirring up that sediment that exists. They're not taking something outside of the water and putting it there. They are just resuspending temporarily something that's already there. It was, in my opinion, all this was absurd. It made no sense. And if a judge had a ruled in their favor, almost anything we do on the water could have been a violation of the Clean Water Act without a permit.
Judge Richardson, as a matter of fact, made comment about that and said that his grandchildren, I thought it was interesting, he made it a personal issue, bringing in his grandchildren fishing, said they would be accountable to the EPA under the Clean Water Act. Let's talk here for a moment about this whole event. What precipitated this?
This is an ongoing goal of Mr. Albee, who, as most people probably know, has his TV show. I believe it's called Carolina Outdoor Journal. It's been a goal of his for years to get shrimp trawling out of our state waters, and they try any effort they can to remove shrimp trawling. Most fail because most aren't backed by science, but this is something they've been working for decades to do. And when one angle fails, they just try another. They keep throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks. And I can't tell you the stress on the fishermen, the financial burden in this case, you're hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it's really getting absurd, in my opinion.
The impact that this has had on the commercial fishing industry. Let's talk about the growth of the industry, or if you will, the decline. I'm comfortable that there has been a reduction in the number of commercial fishermen. Is that correct?
Absolutely. In every sector, just about, there's been a decline.
When you say sector, we're talking fin fish, we're talking shellfish,
shrimp. Yeah.
Okay.
We have multiple fisheries in the state. Fishermen generally bounce from one fishery to the next. And one of the problems you're seeing is we don't encourage our kids to get into the fisheries anymore because of the constant attacks. You want your kids to get into something that has a future. And if you're scared it could be shut down at any time, you don't encourage your kids to get into it.
Well, you've also faced other challenges because of hurricanes. You've got environmental challenges. We were talking earlier, as a matter of fact, a few moments ago, with the North Carolina Coastal Federation and the degradation of the estuaries and the effort to try to recover those estuarine areas. Then you add to that just the economics of the industry, the cost of fuel, the cost of the gear, things of this nature. And then the challenges associated with any kind of, if you will, law enforcement action that comes against fishermen. That's pretty brutal, is it not?
Yeah, regulation is brutal. All of it is, but the industry's always dealt with weather, with fish abundance increases and decreases just like the tide ebbs and flows. It always has, it always will, works in cycles. Fishermen deal with it. Everybody, every business deals with economy, increased cost.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the cost you get for your product doesn't increase at the same rate as the cost for fuel and other stuff. That's a given. Every industry deals with that, but not every industry deals with personal attacks. This allocation issue where people are trying to take seafood off the tables and take commercial fishermen off the water simply because they want to harvest those fish or catch them themselves, and that's what this all amounts to. At the end of the day, it's an allocation issue. It's who should have access to our waters and our fish.
But the fish are there. Now, grant you, you mentioned they change and they change their migratory habits. There are other challenges. the temperature of the water, the salinity of the water, all of that. If you have heavy rainstorms, you lose access to certain fish or certain species. If you don't have a lot of rain, it changes the salinity of the water. So you see this as basically a targeted attack on the commercial industry.
No doubt, that's what it's been for decades since the Coastal Conservation Association started in North Carolina, and these other groups like the Fisheries Reform Group. That it's all about allocation, in our opinion. They can talk about the resource all they want. The recreational community, unfortunately, is becoming one of the largest sources of removals in a lot of our fisheries, but they still point the finger at the commercial industry. And I've always told people, when one person who kills a fish attacks or seeks to regulate another person who kills a fish, it's competition. I mean that's the only way to explain it. You're trying to regulate your competition and get the upper hand, and that's just the facts. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. That's what's occurring here.
One thing that was noted, appearing in the Carteret County News-Times, is the economic impact of the fishery, and particularly shrimping. According to a recent report, going back to 2021, still gathering information on 2022, the shrimp trawling, which is mostly in the Sounds, 99.15 million pounds of shrimp worth $24.9 million, roughly 21.5% of the entire fishing and shellfish industry.
Yeah.
So,
and that value is dockside value. That's what the fishermen get for that product.
Okay.
That's not after it's gone out and spread out through the economy. That $20-some million is just what the fishermen derive from that initial sale of the product.
Suits like this, and of course there is another suit that is underway going through the state courts, if I'm not mistaken, and that having to do with a suit against the state of North Carolina, the Department of Environment, DEQ, Department of Environment Quality, the Division of Marine Fisheries, on the grounds that they have not fulfilled their commitment to protecting the resource. These ongoing suits, what is it doing to the future of commercial fishing in light of the fact that this is almost a $90 million total enterprise in North Carolina, and as you just said a moment ago, at the dock. So that's really at the wholesale rate.
Yep.
So what is this doing to the commercial fishing industry and to just the consumers, the access for the consumer?
Yeah, to the industry, it demoralizes you. It makes you feel like a second-class citizen. You're shamed. We've actually been called rapists of the resource and all this kind of stuff. And nobody cares more about the resource than fishermen. We do what we do because we love the water, and we're dependent on that resource. Each generation depends on that resource to be there to provide food for not only our family but the other people of the state and across the country. And as you mentioned, when our access decreases, consumer access decreases, and when access decreases, prices increases up, which inadvertently affects people of lower income classes. I always tell people, anybody who doesn't have the health or the wealth to access these fisheries on their own depend on commercial fishermen, and they own that resource the same as the rest of us do and deserve access through us. That's the reason we're licensed to do this in the state, because we represent those people. The Fisheries Reform Act, when it was passed in 1997, the preamble, the second line says, whereas the General Assembly recognizes that commercial fishermen perform an essential function by providing wholesome food for the citizens of the state and thereby properly earn a livelihood. We were recognized by this state as essential for producing food, and we properly earn a living by doing so, and we're licensed to do so, and we have a right to do so despite what some people may think.
We're talking with Glenn Skinner, again, the Executive Director of the North Carolina Fisheries Association. We're wrapping things up. We may have a few moments here. I'm looking at Ross. We'll see if we have a moment here as we wrap it up here on Viewpoints. Just want to mention congratulations to the North Carolina Fisheries Association on the success on for all intents and purposes, a slam dunk from the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. They were pretty specific. They were demonstrative, to be exact. Stay with us for more here on the Talk Station. With only a minute to go, we've got Glenn Skinner still with us here this afternoon, Executive Director of the North Carolina Fisheries Association. Glenn, if anyone's interested in finding out more information about the commercial fishing industry, and particularly the North Carolina Fisheries Association, where do they go?
They can go to our website. It's ncfish.org.
Okay.
And feel free to look at the website and join. We can use the support.
Well, okay, so it's a membership organization.
Absolutely.
So, really, the consumer might be a worthwhile participant in this as well, if they enjoy eating fresh, wild-caught fish.
Yeah, again, we're self-employed, but we work for them, and we encourage consumers, recreational and commercial fishermen to join the association and support it.
You know, we won't belabor this, but there are a lot of recreational fishermen that are not necessarily opposed to the commercial industry.
Absolutely. I mean, without a doubt, if they were, we've been put out work years ago.
A long time ago.
Yeah.
And by the way, I like that comment, the fact that the North Carolina legislature sees the industry as essential. I think it's a very important word, essential.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Glenn, for your time. Congratulations again to the North Carolina Fisheries Association.
Thank you for having me.
It's always a pleasure. All right, more to come here on the Talk Station, FM 107.1.